Oh, we do have video.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi, Rose. Could everyone please mute yourselves when you're joining us? Thank you. Rose, my new friend. Or I don't know if we can do that, you all. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on World Introvert Day. Please mute yourself when you join us.
There we go. Hi.
Hi. Okay, so I think we'll get started. Everyone, could you please mute yourselves? And we will get started. I want to welcome you on World Introvert Day to our panel discussion. As with me, every opportunity I have to talk about introversion, I do. It's always my goal to educate and to empower. And so I'm happy on World Introvert Day, which is now in its 10th year of existence, to offer my friends, some introverts, to talk about the state of 2021 and what I is the year of the introvert. I'm a proud introvert, always on a to show that we come in all colors, shapes, and sizes. I've been talking about introversion almost daily now. It seems like people are always reaching out and asking for advice, whether it's personal or professional, and I do my best to honor everyone and answer with the best information that. But what I find is I think that we're all looking for understanding. It's not that we're looking for special treatment. Introversion is not a dysfunction. It's not a disease. It's not an illness. There's nothing wrong with us. We are just as we were created. But I believe that all of us are for some sort of understanding. And there are scientists and psychologists who talk about the introversion is neurological. Some say it's a preference, some say it's physiological. I think that it's probably a combination of all of these things, but I know that we do live in this extrovert rewarding, and it seems like most of the time introversion is more as negative than positive. So I personally am on a mission to change that. As for my panelists, I want to thank them now for helping me change the narrative. They've co-hosted and joined me on other panels. We had the unapologetically introverted panel rolling out last month at its Peace and Purpose conference. We had the While Black and Introverted Part 1 and Part 2 panels hosted by Chicago State Foundation in July and September. I'm looking forward to many more. So allow me to briefly introduce our panelists. First is Christina Steed. And Christina,
Hi.
Christina is Executive Vice President of Flowers Communications Group, host of the podcast First Over 40, and an adjunct professor at DePaul University's College of Communications. Christina is an award-winning communications pro with expertise in multicultural marketing and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and works with some of the world's top brands. So first, each panel I'm going to introduce and just ask one quick question. So for Christina, how in 2021 will you make your voice heard? What should other introverts do to amplify their voices?
Well, my word for 2021 is courage. So, to look forward to having courage in everything that I do, how I show up for work, how I show up for other people, how I show up for myself. And I would encourage others who, are looking to do something daring this year, looking to kind of push the envelope and really like step into themselves, step into their introversion and be unapologetic about it. Like, come along with me and have some of this Leo lion courage.
Yes.
Love it. Okay, next is Darrious Hillman, who has more than 25 years experience in strategic fund development, marketing and communications, and event management. He's currently the executive director of Chicago State Foundation, who we partnered with, where he has lead accountability for advancing the interests and welfare of Chicago State University through partnership development, stewardship of university assets, and securing financial support from individuals, corporations, and foundations. Darrious, how in 2021 will you make your voice heard? And what should other introverts do to amplify their voices?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Jeri. Always a pleasure. I think for me, it is the work that started in 2020, and that is to stand flat-footed and just stand in the power of being an introvert. It is really a superpower. I think in a time such as this, the unique energy that introverts bring into spaces is more needed than ever. We're not always the one doing all the talking, jumping in. We're more tend to be thoughtful. I tend to, at 52 and being an introvert, say it like I mean it. And by the time I say it, I've given it a lot of thought. So I'm really just going to step into each of the spaces this year, knowing that part of the value proposition I bring is that superpower of being an introvert and all of the weight and gravitas that has.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Our next panelist, Mr. Kenny Anderson. Kenny is a retail executive and advisor. His experience with leading large teams as senior vice president of merchandising and planning for fashion companies Hugo Boss and Giorgio Armani. However, his passion project is also mentoring and coaching the next generation of talented leaders within his community. Kenny, how in 2021 will you make your voice heard, and what should other introverts do to amplify their voices?
Thanks, Jeri. Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of a previous statement. I identified something in 20 that I want to carry over into 21, which is stepping outside of the comfort zone. This is something that I, for sure, made a conscious effort to do things in terms of just experimenting with different projects that were critical and passionate for me, and or attempting to do things that I've never done before, like speak on panels such as this. This is of it. And so I'm taking that into 21 and just saying, let's get started with things that I normally wouldn't do, but in the uncomfortable space is where the growth happens. So that's my mission for 21.
Thank you. Well said. Our next panelist is Cynthia Pong. She is an award-winning career strategist, speaker, and author of Don't Stay in Your Lane, the Career Change Guide for Women of Color. An NYU trained lawyer turned career coach. She's on a mission to give women of color the power and respect that they deserve. Cynthia, how will you make your voice heard in 2021, and what advice do you have for other introverts?
Thanks, Jeri. It's actually piggybacking off of Kenny Lewine and what Darrious said. For me, I launched my speaking career pretty much in 2020, so I'm going to continue amplifying my voice, ironically for an introvert and someone who doesn't like to talk to people. But I'll keep doing that in 2021 to, push forward and advance my mission, like you just said. My advice for other introverts is, to start where you maybe do feel a little more comfortable, like maybe with writing or posting, sharing things in a way that feels comfortable to you, but then to gently push yourself beyond your comfort zone, like Kenny was saying. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Our next panelist is Kenny with an I, Kenny Dominguez. Kenny is a career and mindset coach for introverted Black women and women of color, helping them thrive in the workplace authentically. She provides clarity, leadership, and practical organizational culture strategy and design for individuals and purpose-driven, people-centric companies who want to foster balanced teams and improve engagement within the workplace. Kenny with an I, how will you make your voice heard in 2021, and what do you have to share with our introverts?
First, thank you, Cynthia. I'm really excited to be on this panel today and to hear from everyone. One of the things that I want to focus on and also help support other introverts on their path and their journey is stepping authentically and boldly into who they are and really owning it and thriving in the workplace. And I want to do that by helping to coach and support and encourage and empower introverts to be able to do that. And just to be brave and to know that being an introvert is a strength. It's not a weakness, and it's something to celebrate. And we bring something to every team and every room and the organizations that we occupy.
Thank you, Kenny with an I. Our next panelist is Collette Brown-Rogers. Collette is an educational specialist whose passion lies in reaching traditionally marginalized students. She is completing a doctoral degree in higher education leadership. She enjoys reading, spending time in nature, and embracing her introversion. Collette, how will you make your voice heard this year, and what advice do you have for other introverts about amplifying their voices?
Well, I ditto everything that my fellow panelists have said, but I would like to add that I encourage us to be the voice of truth, especially in the workplace. For example, if there are things in the workplace that are not being addressed, or if there are issues that people are ignoring, I encourage introverts to speak up and to use our introversion as a strength to be heard. There's a quote by Marian Anderson that's popularized by Nelson Mandela. Our deepest fear is that we are inadequate, but that, who are we not to be powerful and not to shine? Of course, that's not the direct quote, but that's the gist of it. So I'm encouraging us to shine at full wattage.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Jacob Marek. Jacob is a professional travel advisor and founder of Introvert Travels, a travel agency designed to help us introverts see the world in a way that suits our unique personality types. Jacob, how in 2021 will you make your voice heard?
Hi, Jeri. Happy New Year. I was thinking about this actually in 2021. I always talk about moving the needle. So in whatever way that might be, it doesn't always have to be a big, loud, announcement to the world, but oftentimes just having those one-on-one conversations, either in the workplace or with your neighbors or friends, taking a stand for something, something that you're passionate about, and then trying to move the needle in whatever way that might be, whatever you're comfortable with. And like many of the other panelists said, just kind of being bold and standing in your truth. And oftentimes that can happen just in the one-on-one or the smaller conversations that we have. Just move the needle.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Jacob. And I am Jeri Bingham. I am a marketing professional and a doctoral student, currently conducting research on the topic of introversion. Planning to complete my research this year and graduate along with Collette. She's my classmate. I'm saying this out loud because we need to commit. We're going to finish this year. Okay, so, and I'm also the founder of the HushLoudly podcast. So many of you are aware of it, many of you are not, but all of the panelists here have been interviewed, so you can hear their stories. Just go to hushloudly.com. Kenny with the Y is the only one whose podcast is not up yet, but it will be up soon. And later on, which is very atypical of me as an introvert, but I'm going to make a couple of proclamations. I feel very strongly about our personality style, and it's so obvious that we all are so connected and believe in community and want to support love each other. And so I'm excited about that, but I'm just letting you know it's very atypical of me, but I'm standing out, stepping out like some of our panelists do. And I'm proud to do so with you. I thought this time we would share a little research. A lot of people will ask me what's the difference. Introverts ask me, but also extroverts. They really want to know sort of a definition, and there doesn't seem to be one. But Collette, if you could share the slide, I created just this document where this is how I sort of separate us, and based on just my field research and what I've read between introverts and extroverts. It's about how we gain energy, And so for us, you know, we expend energy in social situations versus extroverts who gain it. And so they are like jazzed and excited after a big social affair. And usually introverts are just the opposite and can't wait to get out and get home. The way we process things, which we'll talk about a little bit later, our sensitivity to stimuli. I have a lot of lights on now, but that's because we are here in this panel. Usually there are no lights in my home. They're just candles or it's just natural light. And I'm finding that it's because we are super sensitive. And so we need stimulation versus our extrovert pals who are less sensitive. And so they can have every light on, every TV on, every radio on, and not be bothered by any of it. And it's because that's how we are wired. Also the socialization, you know, we just choose to socialize differently and the way that we make decisions. I'll have this information later. I have your email, so I'll send it to you. So you don't have to try and take pictures of this. I mean, you can if you want to, but I'll send it to you later. The next, I just want to talk about the misperceptions, which as introverts, you've probably already heard this. People think we are shy and timid, or we're hermits and we hate people and we out. And all of these things that just aren't accurate. There are some shy introverts. People are shy, but the shyness is an anxiety. It's not, and it's still nothing to be negative or ashamed of. But typically, that's the first response that people just assume that you are shy. Sometimes our quieter nature or choice to not speak makes people assume these things and they just sort of create their own narrative. And so we want to try to educate people. Please, all of us, please, let's just work on educating people and making them aware of who we are and how we move in this society. According to Susan Cain, I always talk about her, love her, the author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, which has made the New York Times bestseller list. She says that introverts listen more than they talk, think before they speak, and they prefer to devote their social energies to close friends, colleagues, and family. They tend to dislike conflict, dislike small talk, and enjoy deep discussions. So I'm curious if that's you, because that's me. In contrast, extroverts tend to be more assertive and dominant, but also in great need of company. Extroverts think out loud and on their feet, and they prefer talking to listening and rarely find themselves at a loss for words. And also, as she defines shy, she says shy is the fear of social disapproval or humiliation, while introversion is a preference for environments that are not overstimulating. So I'm trying to just give you some examples of what the experts and the researchers are saying that I hope will help you. Another piece of research that I wanted to share that I think is really mind-blowing, according to Liz Foslian and Molly West, who shared on Susan Cain's website. Collette, can you show that slide? Oh no, that's the next one. Quiet Revolution. They said our introversion is related to our nervous system, and that introverts are less sensitive to dopamine to feel happy. Our nervous system is one that is energy conserving. So the introvert's nervous system is energy conserving, while the extrovert's nervous system is energy spending. And this is why we introverts are thrilled and satisfied over doing things that extroverts probably think are boring, like reading a book or taking a walk and sitting out under the beautiful trees and watching the sunset. Collette and I were talking about this last night, and so I wanted her to expound on this. And we also have one more slide that Collette can comment on. It's from Marty Olson Laney, the author of The Introvert Advantage. Marty says that introverts have a longer neural pathway, and that's why we process stimulation differently. When we process, we include our internal thoughts, feelings, long-term memory, so it takes us longer to get to the while extroverts have a shorter pathway. So Collette, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I love this because it speaks about introversion at the cellular level. And the scientists have found that introversion or introverts, we respond to the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, whereas extroverts respond, they need more dopamine. And dopamine for introverts is too much dopamine makes us a little bit more antsy, a little bit more nervous, whereas acetylcholine helps us to relax. And so how do we get that? We get that through those activities. Well, we all have those neurotransmitters, but the acetylcholine for introverts is triggered by those things that, such as the reading, walks in nature, or things that are usually akin to what introverts do. That helps to increase our acetylcholine. Think of it like this. Acetylcholine is akin to herbal tea for introverts, whereas dopamine is akin to caffeine for extroverts. So I love that because it speaks to who we are on the cellular level.
Thank you, Collette.
Thank you for allowing me to be nerdy.
Just wanted to share that research. So now I'd like to jump to the pandemic. Let's jump to 2020. And we all experienced loss, grief, confusion, a fear, all kinds of things that we experienced during this weird virus, the pandemic, the shelter in place orders. And so I wanted to ask the panelists how they personally adapted. I wanted to start with Christina and ask, did you gain more solitude and time to recharge? Did you lose it? How did you manage? Anything you learned? And so, if Christina, you could give us your feedback on that.
Yeah, sure, Jeri. So for me, I had the privilege and benefit of being able to work from home immediately. Our office decided in March to have everyone work from home. And so for me, my home is already like my sanctuary. So I already had, things set up to be able to be at home. And I felt less of a pressure to need to do something, right? So we have this need in our society that we're not valued or worthy unless we're doing something and not just existing. So for me, it was this clarity around that my worth is not tied to what I do from a professional standpoint, from, just kind of how I show up in the world in terms of the work. It's how I show up in the world in terms of pouring into others and helping live my own life fully, right? So for me, it was a time of, I didn't feel necessarily like cooped up. I was certainly with some anxiety around the direction of where our world was going to go. And then certainly when social justice became the second pandemic that happened, the work that I do in multicultural marketing and reaching out from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, it just got heightened. Like for me, it was like, okay, it's go time. And it's time that people are going to listen to my recommendations, my thoughtfulness, my approach to things, because it's not just surface level work that needed to be done. It was, let's get to the deep, let's start digging, let's be, very honest and true about the work that we're doing. And so for me, I was able to kind of, work through it, even my extroverted husband being away from me. We were in two different cities when everything shut down and locked down. And so we had to kind of, work through that. But I think it came off as my strengths kind of pulled through, because now this is where you go, girl. Like this is kind of your zone, crisis communications work and kind of being at home with yourself. So I leaned into that for sure.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask Jacob, since his life is travel with his introverted travel agency, and he was never at home, always somewhere bouncing around. So from your experience, what do you have to add about that?
Yeah, I don't even know what 2020 was. That was crazy. Unfortunately, my experience was a little different because I'm in the travel industry. And of course, everything just sort of came to a screeching halt. I think I have a little PTSD from March, actually. I was in Colombia. I was supposed to be there for several months, and I was only there for about 3 weeks or so. Really didn't get a chance to do anything that I had planned on. Spent most of my time simply just kind of like keeping up on every development for the travel industry, which was changing by the hour, helping people, postpone, rebook, cancel. So I think I might have kind of lost it for a little while. I think, I, of course, enjoy the, coziness of my own home, but without travel, it sort of made me wonder, like, who am I? For so long, travel has kind of defined who I am. It's my biggest passion, it's like what lights me up. And so having sort of being forced to completely change lifestyle, to not be booking clients, it was just kind of like scary. So during the pandemic, I kind of was trying to occupy my time discovering or rediscovering new hobbies. So I, went kind of crazy in my garden, and I was doing just a lot of like, simple stuff. I enjoy, coloring books and stuff like that. Just trying to keep creative, keep busy. Decorating my home was like just kind of like rearranging a room every day almost. It was just like those little things that kind of kept me grounded, sane, busy, creative. And I was able to kind of find ways to incorporate, my past travel experiences into my current isolation. So that was kind of a way to stay slightly more sane.
Okay. Anybody else? Any?
For me, and I've always been very work obsessed because it's easier to pour myself in that. It became my safe space. And that I had crossed the year mark at a year and a half now in the job that is the job of my lifetime. I was saying to my therapist, because again, it takes a village to keep this going. But I was saying to my therapist, I cannot imagine how I would have reacted even 2-3 years ago to the dual pandemics. So a lot of that is growth. Part of that really is finding the power in being an introvert and being able to look folks in the eye and go, this is who I am. This is how I receive energy. I'm not trying to be something different anymore. My job isn't to make you feel more comfortable. My job is to explain myself, but only once so you get me. So that I spent this year in a job I adore in a university, a predominantly Black institution, serving Black and brown first generation students. In this dual pandemic, all the noise that remained in the air, things that mattered a year ago, fights I was willing to have, fears about myself, all of that sort of dissipated almost immediately. And what was most important became most important, and everything else, I found even more courage to go, I'm not dealing with that. And I remember when the pandemic first started as an introvert, I felt for my extroverted friends. And now I realize how much. I miss people, I like people, but I don't draw energy from them. So the pandemic did not take a central energy source from me. It did from my extroverted friends. So the fact that I sit here and I can still talk to funding partners via Zoom and internet and phone, and that there is a clarity around the importance of the work I represent. I was saying to my therapist, I think I'm going to look back at 2020 and say it was one of the better years of a great life.
Wow.
And it reminds me, one final thought on this, I keep saying to folks, we are not all in the same boat. I saw this saying, we're not in the same boat, we're in the same storm. But I don't have to stand in line at the Joel Osco all day while people are making their own role. I have no commitment to share sacrifice choices. I don't have to put my life on the line every day to feed my family. I've not missed a check. So for me as an introvert, the two things I've made a commitment to is to really lean into being of active service, and two, saying it like I mean it.
Beautiful.
Yes, I've enjoyed, it's horrible to say that. I've not hated the pandemic. I have spent every day looking for silver linings, and they are abundant if you look for them.
Thank you. Beautiful, profound. We're going to move on to our next question, which is the topic or the theme is introversion a moment or a movement? And the reason I asked that question is because, and I don't know if it's just the pandemic, but the number of introverted communities that I've discovered in the last few months is just mind blowing. And I don't know if it's just more of us and we're talking more because we're home. I don't know, or I don't know if they've been around, but we just weren't in one centralized place. But Instagram has been great for me in terms of connecting and meeting introverted groups. And so I believe it's a movement. Something's percolating, something's happening here. So I'd love to know, Collette, Kenny, anyone else, do you think introversion is a moment or a movement?
I'll start. I definitely feel like introversion is a movement. What is a movement? It's a series of moments, right? And so here we are finding introverts. You have, I mean, just Google the word introvert and you probably have over 70 million inquiries. People are finding, introverts are finding, we are finding each other. We're finding our tribe. We're on Instagram, Facebook. You have all kind of groups and podcasts and books. And so, yes, definitely a movement and one of which I'm proud to be a part of.
Kenny with an eye?
I would actually say it's a little bit of both. I feel like the year of 2020 was definitely a moment for introverts. I feel like, that's when there was a heightened awareness around what it was, or at least a real interest in exploring what is the definition of an introvert, or what does introversion mean? And specifically, what does that look like in the workplace? And how does that impact people? And I think, when I think about introversion as a movement, I 100% agree. I've found numerous communities of other introverts that have been so supportive and encouraging. And one of the things that I would highlight about introverts that I've noticed is that, within community settings, we're so collaborative, which I think is really interesting to note, because a lot of us have probably received feedback at some point in time, performance feedback, that, we weren't a team player, or, they didn't feel like we were connecting or integrating with the team, which is unfortunate, because introverts, in my experience, are some of the most collaborative people that you'll ever come across. And I've seen that firsthand within our own communities. And so I think from that respect, even at an organizational space, because so many of us did have to come and work remote. I've been fortunate. I've worked in tech for about 7 or 8 years prior to starting my coaching and consulting practice. And so I was already, similarly to Christina, set up for the remote life. So I kind of felt like I was built for this and well set up and poised to just not miss a step. But what excites me about the introversion movement as a whole is the potential, and the fact that there's a light, I feel, that's shining on us right now. And that just by virtue of being present and being visible, we are showing other introverts that we are here, that we exist, and that that you can carve out your own lane, that you can reshape and redefine how you look at your life and your career. And I know specifically for me last year, haven't quite made it into 2021 yet. I really focused, I feel like this was the year I learned how to really take care of myself and to make sure that I was doing value-centered work, and that I was able to really step into who I am. And so I wish that for all introverts. And I do think this is just going to become a bigger movement going into 2021. So I'm really excited about that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to say anything about that?
Jeri, I'll also add, thinking about it from just a corporate and leadership perspective, what's been interesting for me to pay attention to is as we're going through the 2020 pandemic into 21, I've had lots of conversations with some of my colleagues about, leadership style and the type of leadership style that's necessary during this type of a pandemic. Corporate-wise, typically the majority of the CEOs come across really strong, like, this is what we're doing. I know that this is the approach and everyone needs to just follow my lead. But during a time like this, it actually required a different style of leadership from individuals to be able to connect with their team members and to connect with the people who directly report into them, to think differently about what type of leadership style was necessary in order to move them through this situation, which is still ongoing. So as I think about that, I think for sure there's a movement involved, because certain styles from a leadership perspective, if that's the way they've always led, they wouldn't work in this situation. So it requires that they come out of that space and do something totally different, or else they're going to be replaced by someone, because the future requires, this generation requires that leadership is able to understand and to be able to identify and connect with them on a much deeper level, even though they are reporting into or are employees of the organization.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Kenny. Let's move on to the strengths of introverts. We have so many. I wanted to start with Darrious and Christina, but please share your 3 greatest strengths and how you will rely on those in 2021.
So I think for me, my 3 greatest strengths are communication. Clearly, that's what I do. That's what I do as a professional. Listening, and then being objective in the sense of weighing the pros and cons and taking all of the information from the folks who are above me, from the CEO to the intern, and then processing the information to come up with the best recommendation. So I'm not tied to title, I'm not tied to gravitas or people's whatever. It's the best idea wins, and wherever that idea comes from, I'm always open to that. And so that again has been just a part of my management style, a part of how I approach even just in my personal life, relationships with people. I'm really, really, as all introverts are, attracted to intelligence and attracted to, really great debate and discussion. And so that's kind of how I come to decisions and come to recommendations. And so those are my strengths. And those are things that have cropped up in the performance review, in addition to, you don't seem connected enough. So.
Yeah. And piggybacking on what Christina said, and Christina, for full disclosure, is not only a dear friend, but one of my bosses. She is vice chair of the Chicago State Foundation Board, so we talk quite a bit. So I think for me, the strengths, empathy. I had it coming into 2020. I realized how much of this helped me in 2020, and certainly taking that into 2021. Another, and it was my word for the year. My word for last year was joy. And I think that's another strength for me. I will stop in the middle of a crisis. And I've asked the president of the university, we have this conversation because my goodness, the president of Chicago State is turning around a 153-year institution in the middle of 2 pandemics. And I constantly ask her, as I do myself, are you finding joy in this? You must still find joy in this. So it is empathy, to really try to put myself in other people's shoes, not to treat them the way I want to be treated, but to treat them the way they would want to be treated. There is a difference. Mm-hmm. So empathy, joy, and then grace. I think that's a strength that I've made exponential growth on in 2020. Grace for myself and others. You will hear me say constantly when someone's running on the Zoom call late, oh, I'm so sorry. And I would say, I'm not accepting or giving apologies for the foreseeable future. I'm not doing it. We're going to hold each other accountable, but I don't know about you, but I've not had in my lifetime 2 pandemics happening simultaneously. All bets are off. Grace. So joy was my word actually for 2020, and I started to incorporate it, and I did a really good job, not even knowing the pandemic was happening. This year, I sent a note to Christina today or yesterday. My word for 21 is grace. There are skills that were already there, but I'm truly going to own them as a strength and a superpower this year. Grace for myself, grace for others. We need it now more than ever. And if I can bring that into the world every day in some small way by letting people off the hook, even though we're going to be held accountable, but to go breathe, remind me to breathe, you breathe. We've not had this happen in our lifetime. We're not going to be perfect every day. And that's got to be okay.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to ask Cynthia, who is managing this chat. You know, I see she's just taken over and I love it. So I'm curious, Cynthia, can you share what are your greatest strengths? And how will you rely on those in 2021?
How can what?
How will you rely on them in 2021?
Yeah, well, I'm going to say this is not one of the questions I prepared. So you all are going to get whatever's on the top of my mind. Clearly, one of my strengths is being up in the chat. I do quite enjoy that. I feel it's very introvert friendly for me. But, you know, this is sort of similar to what Darrious and Kenny and I were saying, but I feel like I kind of in a weird way was built for 2020. Like I had no problem transitioning because I already worked from home as someone who's an entrepreneur and I work for myself. I was already meeting with clients on Zoom prior to that. You know, it was really no issue for me to really lean into that and having control over my time and things, and then not feeling the constant pressure of having to debate and then say yes to social engagements that I didn't want to do. So that really in a way freed me, but then I did feel a lot of, I think it was Jacob maybe who was saying this, but I felt a little bad for my extrovert friends because they were really struggling and I was totally okay being at home for like 3 days in a row and not really having to go outside. So in 2021, I mean, I'm just gonna probably keep doing a lot of the same, but somebody says earlier, I think it was Kenny with an I, I'm not sure. I do think it's really important for all of us to remain and become even more visible as introverts because it is part of this movement that I feel like we are a part of, to allow other introverts to feel seen, to allow them to feel heard through our stories and then empowered to share their own. And like Kenny with a Y was saying, like leadership, yeah, and extroverts do need to understand how to give us space to really be our full selves and maximize our own potential in whatever context it is, because if not, we are wasting all of our potential. And that's why I love events and spaces like this, because they can really educate and open people's minds to how to do things in a better way. So that's my ramble about 2021.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anybody else on the panel want to give their 3 strengths?
I'll just give one. I think that courage and resilience are a strength of a lot of introverts. I don't think we oftentimes give ourselves enough credit. I think perhaps that there is a correlation between introversion and anxiety. And when I say anxiety, I mean just like overthinking in our own heads. And so 2020 really taught me that I am maybe stronger, braver, more savvy than I sometimes give myself credit for. And so here I am, January 2nd, 2021, I'm still standing here. So going forward, I think, I have that experience of like, okay, 2020 was crap. I got through it and, it's only going to go up from here. So yeah, courage and resilience, I think, are 2 strengths of introverts.
Thank you.
I'll give one. Yes, thank you, Jacob. I'll give one. I think one of my strengths is my intuitiveness as an introvert, being able to rely on an inner compass, whether, to make decisions, to see people, to engage. So, I feel like 2020 really helped me to embrace more of that, as I transitioned from the office to working from home and to be able to differentiate between isolation and solitude. I think, as an introvert, people tend to think that because we are, more energized by being alone or being in nature, that we also isolate. And for me, Well, as an introvert, I do have a tendency to isolate, but in this ramble, I am able to also capitalize on my intuitiveness when it comes to work and making decisions and, like I say, interacting and engaging with people. So that's what I learned.
If I could add,
Yes.
for me, Jeri, I've really tapped into my listening ability. It's obviously a strong skill set of introverts, but this past year was quite difficult, obviously, and I spent a lot of time like reconnecting with people as well as family and friends who I hadn't really spent much time with, especially on the friend side. But I was able to really listen a great deal more and really reconnect on, and help others, I believe, in a lot of ways in terms of being able to navigate through this situation. It was really hard. My wife is an extrovert actually. So for her, this was a very difficult situation, not being able to see family and reconnect and to gather and to group and to get the energy that way. Whereas for me, I was totally comfortable being at home, but reconnecting, in a different way. And so for me, I found that listening really helped not only individuals that I was, supporting, but also myself in a way. And so that was something that I definitely, grew on in terms of a skill set that I really appreciate.
Okay, thank you. I was gonna ask this later, but I'll ask it now since Jacob brought it up. I received an email earlier today from someone saying that they overthink, excuse me, everything. I do too. And so I would love to hear, I know a couple of you said you have some strategies. So help us introverts as we create our masterpiece and then we rewrite it and redo it like me last night, going over my talking points and wanting to make sure that I'm inclusive and I'm, helping everyone and doing my best and trying to be as perfect as can be, knowing that perfection doesn't exist. But I live that especially when it's something I'm passionate about. I'm going to give my all, but I'm also going to overthink it and overanalyze it to death. So who has some strategies?
I got one. I got two.
Okay.
And again, I have to thank my therapist. If you don't have it, let me advocate. If you don't have a therapist,
Yes.
get a therapist. They're the best things to have during pandemic. But my therapist said something to me a few years ago. And I clutched my invisible pearls. I remember sitting on the sofa. He said, you're a catastrophizer. And I said, say what? What? Are you? And in context, I was like, I don't think I've heard this word, but I think in context, I know what you're trying to say about me. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And he drew the lines to where that came from. It's the intersection of being shy, growing up in a dysfunctional household, being very perfection driven and overthinking everything. If there is a way for something to fail or to crash, I had thought it out. And what I found is that while I was having great success, I wasn't having joy and I was not extending grace. I had to call some of my old teams. While I was never mean, never raised my voice, the pressure I put on them, my goodness, because it was the pressure I was putting on myself. And my justification was, I'm not asking for anything I wouldn't do. So when he said that to me, he gave me some reading materials, and I'll try to find what those were, Jeri, to add to the final notes. And what I find I do now, and I've gotten much better at it in these years, when that starts, it's almost when you used to have that rubber band. I literally throughout the day will go, stop it, you're catastrophizing. And it resets me.
Really?
I mean, try it. Just say it when you feel it happening. I go, you're catastrophizing. I'll do it in the mirror when I'm getting dressed. I'll do it in the mirror when I'm combing my hair. I'll do it in the car. I'll do it going into a meeting. And then so I just try that. It seems weird and simple, but my goodness, it's helped me. And I find myself now checking myself less because I'm doing it less. I know when it's starting to happen. And the second thing I would say, embrace the heck out of failure. Look forward to the failure. It's never going to be good enough. And the great thing about 2020, again, a silver lining, I don't have time to waste my time for perfection. I need to move the needle. We're creating a legacy that won't be perfect. I will not let perfect get in the way of good. You have to say words are things. And I think we as introverts, we're smart. I'm just gonna say it. We're incredibly smart. So we know that work you have to do to change course. If anyone's capable of doing it, we are. So that's what I would say, just embrace failure. I say to my team now, make mistakes, and I mean it this time. Make mistakes, learn from them, make different ones. There is joy in the mistake. There is peace in that valley. And but I'll be doing that for the rest of my life. My default position is to overthink, to catastrophize, to look for everything wrong because I overplan and I like to control. And Kenny, you said it, Kenny, with the one. I said it earlier. Now I'm getting joy out of trying something different. Literally calling someone going, oh, that failed miserably. Let me tell you what I learned from that. We shouldn't, okay. Oh, that was horrible.
Right.
And being okay with it, there's power in that. So those are my two little cheats. A lot of it is talking to yourself.
Love it. Thank you. Who else has a strategy?
I use meditation. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's always funny too because introverts are always so polite. Like, well, makes sense.
Right. You go.
No, I was going to add, for me personally, like I sometimes struggle with imposter syndrome. And so a lot of what has helped me cope with having like self-doubt and just kind of internalizing some of those fears and some of the negative self-talk that we tell ourselves is understanding what my triggers are, whether that may be different types of environments, is it what space trigger those feelings for me, and actually using a pen and paper to write it down. There's a great book called Own Your Greatness, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome and Beating Self-Doubt. And it's written by Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin. And it has been so incredibly helpful for me in terms of identifying through the exercises that are in that book. One, understanding what my triggers are, understanding the history behind those triggers and the context. For me, a lot of it came from perfection, which is like what introverts that's honestly what I think makes us overthink a lot, is that we really want to do a great job and we really want it to look perfect, whether that's a presentation or a paper or a book. And sometimes we can be our own enemy, just trying to in the pursuit of perfection. And so sometimes things just have to be good enough. And that's a lesson. I say that as someone who's actively working, and most likely for the rest of my life, I expect to be working through that. But the exercises that are contained within that book, and also just doing some thinking and identifying where those thoughts come from related to self-doubt, and being able to recognize it and having that awareness has been incredibly helpful for me so that I can step more boldly into who I am and show up the way that I need to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also consider it as a part of your self-care. So your self-care is a practice, just like you're working out to get off the COVID-19 is a practice that you have to do, routinely. And it is not something that you just say one day, stop the thinking, and it will stop. So the word of grace that Darrious gave us earlier, this is about putting into practice daily, hourly, whatever it takes for you to reverse some of that thinking, which, has over time built up. I am doing that work right now. So I just wanted to kind of have us think about it in terms of the self-care that we do for ourselves as well.
Christina, to your point, I think that the word practice is important. I was going to say one of the simplest techniques for me to sort of get out of my own mind is meditation, and literally just focusing on your breath, like just feeling the coolness of inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. And something as simple as that in a daily practice, it could be for 5 minutes, it could be for an hour, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. And it really is the best way, I think, for me to quiet down the voices and the anxiety and the overthinking, and to kind of put things into perspective. And just taking a few minutes to breathe and to just focus on one little point makes all the difference. And you can do it throughout the day as well. I mean, even if you're just sitting at work at your desk, take a moment, spin your chair around, don't look at your computer screen, just take a few moments for yourself to get centered, to collect your thoughts. And it's the easiest and it's the easiest way to overcome that, and it's something that literally everybody can do.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we had another question earlier from the audience. She asked, how can professional spaces be made more accessible for introverts? So I wanted Cynthia and Christina to take that, and anyone else.
You want to go first, Christina?
No, you, Cynthia.
All right. Well, I was thinking about this actually more from a perspective of, because I work with, I'm a career coach for women of color, and a lot of my clients are like, I'd say some of them are in leadership positions and some of them are in the position of being employees and having to manage up more. So I think about it a lot from a perspective of helping your supervisor, your manager work with you better, and doing that through advocating for yourself. And Kenny with a Y sort of alluded to this earlier, but I think it can be really powerful for us as introverts if we're having to work with a team or a supervisor, a boss, or anybody like that, to be really, you know, open about what works best for us. Like, to frame it in this way would be my suggestion, to say, like, I want to make sure that I continue to do my best work for the team, for the organization in 2021. And I wanted to let you know, like, these are some of the things that I've realized work best for me. Like, I can give you the best work product if X, Y, Z, and those things might be like that I have periodic one-on-ones with you, or that instead of doing like rapid fire brainstorming on a Zoom, like, could I have, you know, could we have the questions ahead of time so I can think about these? Maybe I can write you a response, or requesting a phone call instead of a Zoom. We were just talking about this before we let everybody in from the waiting room, but like, you know, it's a lot of information to have to process in these Zoom calls sometimes. And when a phone call would be just as good or even better. So being vocal and unapologetic about these things with whoever you're working with, I think can be really transformative. And it's not like you're saying like, okay, you now must work with me in this way, but it is being clear about what is optimal for you, and then try to find a solution together with them about what, you know, what's feasible and within reason for them. How can you all work together to do better for your clients, advance your mission, deliver a better work product, you know? So that's what I was thinking of when you asked this question, Jeri.
Thank you, Cynthia.
And then from my perspective, working in a PR agency communications industry where you would think everyone is extroverted because you're pitching media, you're putting together plans, you're counseling clients, and you need to have that voice in the room. What we do is we start with a DISC profile, so we understand within our company everyone's kind of background and perspective of how they like to be communicated to. So we all complete that when we have a new crop of talent. And then with that, we try to, you know, adapt the way that they want to be communicated to our internal culture and communication style. I'm a executive vice president at our agency, and my nickname is the Quiet Storm. So everyone knows Christina's that introverted leader, but when she brings it, when she's going to, you know, advise you on something, like, people are going to listen. I also think as we talk about and bring more visibility to introversion, we need to be talking about it more within our workspaces so people understand and have a foundational level of how an introverted person functions within the workspace, so that we can truly bring ourselves to work and we're not like putting on masks and having to perform extroversion so people will accept us, so we'll get, you know, perceived a certain way for our performance reviews. And so for me as a leader, I talk about it. I identify the introverts on my team. So, you know, I'm working with them in the way that it makes sense. And I just, you know, we have to put more of it out there, because for me, I didn't get that coming up. So it is incumbent upon me to give what I didn't get, so I can make our culture, our world better for people. So it doesn't take as long for 30-year-olds, Gen Z, Gen Y, whatever, to be in the position that they well deserve to be in because of their talent.
Thank you.
Right.
Anything else?
I have a real quick one. I was introduced to Jeri by one of my bosses, who, when I told her, and it's been a running joke, when I told her I was an introvert, she aggressively told me, you are not. No, you're not, because you broke out in song on command at a big meeting. And I said to her, yeah, but then I went home and lied in the fetal position. I enjoyed the experience, but I was exhausted as all get out by it. But what's great about that too, Cynthia's point and Christina, what I did was set it to her flat-footed. Do you know who does most of my heavy lifting now with staff and board? It is that board member who goes, no, he's an introvert. This is what that means. So he may be sitting here dancing, but he does need that space. He does need an hour before he comes to this event to just get his spirit right. So I think in order to have advocates, it goes back to, we have to be proud of who we are, proud enough to explain it. This is how I receive energy. And even when someone like this person who I adore said, you're not, no, think again. I want you to reconsider, you're not. And I'm like, but I am. And I'll tell you again why. And it's not good, bad, or otherwise. But then she becomes your greatest advocate. And then for all of us now who are the adults in the room, part of my value proposition is that being otherized in so many ways, as a Black man, a gay man, an introvert, a this or that, it taps into that empathy. I am the one now that I have, no matter where you are on the org chart, but I can walk around now and go, no, this is the space we're going to be, and I'm going to create that space by intentional modeling of behavior. There is power in who we are. And I think right now, with what's going on, the world needs us. Extroverts will bring things to the table, but what introverts need to bring into the space right now is this thoughtfulness, this empathy, and we can't do it quietly. Don't keep your magic quiet anymore. That's how I think about it. And if you are in positions where you're a leading staff or either managing up, you have, I believe, for me, an accountability to say it. I'm an introvert, that's what this means. I'm gonna need an extra hour. I'm not gonna talk for the entire meeting. Please stop creating a space where I feel bad if I don't have something to say. I'll send you notes after, and we're gonna all feel better about that. We're gonna be okay with it. It's gonna be okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I was just going to add to that. I do a lot of work with organizations on workplace culture and strategy. And so one of the things is, in terms of creating an environment that is truly equitable and inclusive, you have to design for it. And so a lot of what I spend my time doing with organizations is, one, creating a baseline for them to understand through data, right? Because one of the things I encourage introverts to do is highlight your strengths, like use the things that work well for you. So for me personally, I tend to be very analytical. And so I will use data that I'm able to capture through culture surveys that are designed, that are disseminated to employees in the organizations, to use that information to show like where there may be gaps, right? From everything from how meeting participation happens, or how meetings are designed, or things like, do you have an open office concept, which I think is awful. I've not of those at all. They are not introvert friendly. I definitely need space. But using that information to help highlight where there are gaps and where there might be some discrepancies, and then utilizing that to help them come up with an action plan to where they can do things specifically they're intentional to help create more inclusive spaces for introverts. So figuring out, like, sending out the agenda in advance and not having on the spot brainstorming, like ideation sessions, like explaining to introverts or explaining to the team as a whole, because I think it's just it's a more efficient use of time. And ultimately the brainstorming sessions are going to be more productive. If people know in advance, like, what it is that we're going to be talking about, what's the planned outcome that we'd like to see out of that particular meeting or session. Doing things like incorporating one-on-ones, consistent recurring one-on-ones as a part of a performance management process, so that introverts are in a better position to be able to connect with their direct managers and to be able to have those conversations about growth and development, and to be able to highlight their accomplishments. I think that introverts do a lot at work, but we are not always so quick to highlight or recognize our own successes. And when we utilize one-on-ones, and I think just because as introverts, we're more comfortable communicating in small groups and on individual bases, is that we're more likely to talk about what we did and what we accomplished. And we're great communicators, especially when it comes to written communication. So what better way than to be documenting that and have an opportunity to consistently be sharing that with your direct manager or even like within your organization as a whole. And so I just think that there's a lot from a cultural perspective that we need to change in the workplace, because there's so many biases that we have to contend with as introverts in the workplace. But I think there's a lot that can be done at the organizational scale to help change that. And that's what I'm really hoping to see happen over the next couple of years, is that we start integrating workplace practices that really speak to the other 50% of employees that are being left out of the conversation.
Thank you, Kenny. Anybody else? Okay, so our next question is about introvert joy. And I'm using that word joy. I wanted us to share our practices, rituals, books that help us gain energy, that help us recharge, that help us decompress, that help bring joy. And I just wanted to start about candles. So candles are my thing, and they're in every room. And it's like, I love the way they look. I love to look into the flame. It's inspiring to me. It's beautiful. And then when I meditate, it's like it ritualizes the meditation. It's like it makes me, I light the candle. And I feel like all of my senses are heightened. And I always have scented candles, beautiful soy candles. And so for me, that's it. I even have one right here. Which, you know, I just always, and this is beautiful. So there's a young lady who makes candles, repurposes wine and liquor bottles. Amazing. Don't judge me because it's Hendrick's gin. Okay. So
I respect you because it's Hendrick's gin.
Hendrick's has health benefits. And if you want the lemon drop martini, get a lemon drop martini made with Hendrick's instead of vodka. It's the bomb. But anyway, she makes these beautiful candles, repurposes bottles. So it's called Molit Candles. Her name is Morgan, MOLIT candles.com. And I'm asked her if we can make an introverted candle, a scent for us, and she's working on that. But for me, it's candles. And so I'd love for my panelists to share, what is that thing for you? Help the rest of us recharge and regain our energy.
Well, for me, it's aromatherapy. I probably have a diffuser in most rooms of my house, and even in when I was in the office, diffused various blends that I have created. But daily, I'm blending or diffusing something citrus and something grounding. So if I'm diffusing orange, tangerine, grapefruit, those are all citrus, orange, which brings joy and happiness and helps to increase the acetylcholine for me as an introvert. I'm going to have a grounding of patchouli or sandalwood with that. So I use that in my meditation, in my day-to-day practices. And of course, sea salt baths are good for extracting negativity, negative energy. So, and doodling. Yeah, I doodle a lot.
For me, it is hot tea. I start my day hot water with lemon, then I move on to my flavor of the day, which could be an Earl Grey. I have all types of teas, so I drink them throughout the day. And when I was traveling, I would pick up tea in different places around the world. So just to remind me of my time there and to just have a moment with a warm cup of something, that is just great. I'm a yogi, so I do a lot of yoga. I'm on this 30-day weight loss yoga challenge right now. The weight ain't lost, but it's great in terms of the stretching. And I also I have a stack of books, and you know, I just love it. I love reading. It's really great. And I am on page 645 of Barack Obama's book, so you can't tell me nothing. I didn't finish a 700-page book in almost a month, so there you go.
Part 1 of 2.
Yes.
So those are my things.
I'll kind of piggyback off of what you said. I'm also into yoga as well. I just find that when you look back on your day and you reflect on the best moments, oftentimes yoga is sort of the best moment of my day. But I'll add to everybody else's long and growing list of reading materials. My personal favorite book that I always find very helpful is called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Bronnie Ware is the author, and she was a palliative care specialist for many years. And through her time working with the dying, she kind of was able to synthesize 5 of the most common regrets of the dying. And regret number 1 actually spoke most to me. And it says, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And when I started my business, that was kind of my mantra. And I probably read this book once or twice a year. I always find it to be, inspirational, refreshing, always makes me cry, but it's like a good, healthy, cathartic, life affirming sort of cry. So top 5 regrets of the dying, highly recommend.
Collette Watkins, I believe, just made a comment about R&B music. That's one of my 3, Paulette. For me, it is Pandora, smooth jazz. I have had it for years, so it is so perfectly curated. It is, and we put it on the TV and we just let her, it can go. It knows me. It's not overpowering. It doesn't overwhelm me. It is Isley Brother and Anita Baker and just Diana Krall and a lot of Boney James. Collette, I'm with you on the diffuser. Here is what my diffuser smells like right now. My favorite spa at the W Hotel the Lowe's Hotel in Miami, lavender. I kept trying, when I'm in there, I never knew what it was until this past year. I was like, that's the smell. So now I walk around here, at least sensory, I feel that happy time. And it really does help. And then the third for me is a 9-month-old French Bulldog and a 2-year-old Havanese. They do not care. I will be in the middle of a meeting, and if it's tense, I will get off that call and just sit on the floor with them. It doesn't matter when, they always make time for me. They're always joyful. And I never, when I finally pull myself up, because I gained 20 pounds, when I pull myself up off the floor, I'm happier for it. So those are the things for me. Sounds, sensory, and the unconditional love of these 2.
Yeah.
Cool. For me, I will jump in and say it's a combination of all the things that were just mentioned previously, because they all really help me to manage. I love reading great books that are specifically targeted towards like self-development. The most recent one that I read is by David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. I love an underdog story where he really just kind of pushed himself and his body to compete in a decathlon as a runner, but also achieved the Guinness Book of World Records for the most pull-ups. And I just thought it was a great story, but then just because of his early beginnings. And I love great music as well. R&B, it just really puts you in the right mindset and just kind of gets you to settle and feel calm and at ease. I love a great curated list. But also movement. Movement in the morning is really key and important for me. Yoga was mentioned, but I have to do something to kind of like exert that energy through exercise or running in the morning. It was obviously quite difficult in 20 with the gyms closed, but I was able to go up on the roof and still get something in every morning, which really helped. So a combination of all those things really get me through the day.
Anybody else? Okay, so we'll move on. Thank you. I'm loving all of this and glad we're recording this so I can go back and buy these books and buy these things. So our next question is about being introverted plus. That's what I'm calling it. And so, just looking at this panel, everyone here who I've interviewed and talked to, we are a nice, diverse mix. We're Black, white, we are straight, gay, we're married, single, divorced. And I wonder if your introversion coupled with that identifier matters. and how. So I wanted Christina to take the lead, and we've talked about leading while Black and introverted on another panel. So Christina, what do you think about this? Does it matter?
So it does matter. It does. It matters in recognizing it. So we are not colorblind, and nor should we, aspire to be colorblind. We should be color brave, as Melody Hobson talked about in her great TED Talk. So we do, when we come in the room, Darrious talked about it, when he comes in the room, all 6 feet, beautifulness, and he is who he is. There are assumptions made. When I come in the room, there are assumptions made about me. And we talk about this, Jeri, we talked about this in our last discussion around being a Black woman and introverted and all that brings to the table, because it defies stereotype. It pushes against what people think or presume you to be based on what's been presented on television and media, what they think. So you're already pushing against that perspective. And so it does matter. It matters in the work that I do in terms of multicultural communications and marketing, and how we represent the spectrum and the diversity of different ethnic groups, different racial groups from a marketing standpoint. Our mantra is to reach and respect multicultural audiences. And so we need a full spectrum of who we are as Black and brown people and how we show up in the world. And so it matters to just have I teach at DePaul a course around culture in strategic communications. So I think all of us benefit from having a foundational understanding of what people of color, Black people in particular, are going through, and how that informs the way they show up at the workplace. Because everybody's all about be yourself at work and show up and be yourself, and that is not always the case. It is not always safe for a lot of folks to show up or feel safe and feel that they're a part of the culture of the company. So I do want to mention that. Now, should it take away from who you are and what you want to do and all that? No, it is just something that we all need to recognize. And again, if this year has done nothing else, or the last year, if 2020 has done nothing else, has helped to illuminate certain things for certain pockets of the population who just had no clue as to things that people were facing, from microaggressions to macroaggressions to just really deliberate discrimination and prejudice as it relates to how they move around in this world. And so yes, it matters, and it should definitely be taken into account. And I think we all benefit from people having a foundational understanding of cultural competence so that we know how to interact with each other.
Thank you. Who else? Nobody else? Okay. Well, this is a perfect segue for my special announcement that I'm going to be courageous about. So I have to tell you, and no, I'm not pregnant. I have to tell you this funny story. So as Christina mentioned, and Darrious, we were on this panel and we talked about this leading while Black and introverted, because it is a thing, and because of the stereotypes that we normally are compared to. And so I decided, since there's a World Introvert Day, oh, what about a Black Introvert Day or a Black Introvert Week? And where we would highlight our companies and embrace ourselves and all of these things. And so I submitted to the National Day Calendar. It's this website where you submit your request to get this day. And so you submit and you wait 6 weeks. So I have submitted 3 and there's no response, nothing. So I reached out to my friend, Christina's husband. He said he wasn't going to tell you, Christina, so this is a surprise to you too. And so because he is a media mogul, he owns all of these companies. And so I said, could you ask with me? With the strength and weight of your businesses, maybe they'll respond to me and maybe I can get this day for us. And do you know what he says to me? He says, why can't you create it yourself? And I was like, oh, and he said, put it out there. See if people will get behind you and support it. He said he will, and he's creating a sort of a Black calendar that'll be on blacktimes.com, and we can put it on there. And so my announcement is, I'd like to proclaim February 8th through 15th as Black Introvert Week. And it is in February, which is Black History Month. And I'm going to create all of these things. And I hope that you all will support and be a part of it. So that is a week of empowerment for Black introverts to embrace who we are. We have businesses, podcasts, networks, all of these things. And so that is what my big announcement is.
Bravo.
Thank you. Lastly, regarding the conversation around 2021, and if this is the year of the introvert, introversion to me is a movement. We have used our voices in all kinds of ways. We are living in this extrovert rewarding world that has not changed, but it has been crippled by COVID-19 and the pandemics and the racial and social injustices. Our nation has lost lives and we continue to suffer, but I think we all have hope for 2021. I think for years, introverts have been chameleons. I think that we bend and stretch and we're flexible and we fit into the extrovert world because we have to. It's their world. And so we put on the mask to start a new and act a little differently, to masquerade as an extrovert, to get the interview, to get the job. Then we get the job and we still aren't truly our authentic selves because it's not always accepted. It's not always and so I believe that all of this flexing and bending this year in 2020, I almost feel leveling the playing field is a little strong, but I feel like there has been some evolution there where, you know, we've been able to thrive in this virtual environment. And we've been, of course, our voices are continuing to be heard. So I'm also proclaiming, like I'm somebody, I'm also proclaiming that 2021 is the year of the introvert. I think we're stronger than ever. And I think that we're well equipped to handle almost anything that comes our way. I think it's in our DNA. And so I'd like to announce that proclamation. We have a couple minutes. And so I want to know if Cynthia or anyone in the chat has noticed a question or something that we can address in these last couple of minutes.
I just put them back in the chat, the 3 questions that are pending.
Or is there anything else, my panel, you'd like to add before we close out on world?
There are 3 questions I popped in the chat, Jeri. One's from AJ, one's from Agana, and one's from D. So I don't know if you want to choose from that, if you can see it.
I can't. What's AJ asking?
Okay. AJ says, wonder if you have discovered if introversion thinking results in more holistic cognition. Do you want me to read the other 2 as well?
Okay.
Agana says, beyond the great books mentioned for me to add to my reading list, what other resources, advice, tips would you recommend for those who aspire to managerial, directorial roles as an extroverted introvert? And D asks, how to respond to someone who says, don't label people. Labels such as an introvert are not needed. Also, D wants to know when we can meet again. Lexio wants to know, what do you think of an ambivert? I think that's it.
Okay.
Sounds like another Zoom call.
Yeah, we're loving. I will say, I want to address a couple of things. So no one is 100% introverted or 100% extroverted. And based on the situation, our age, the environment, you may be more extroverted, but usually you are an introvert or an extrovert. The ambivert is the person that's in the middle that, you know, basically can play both sides and has the best of both worlds. But me personally, I believe we all have that. We just choose to turn it on and choose to use it when we need to. I am not an extrovert and never will be, but I can show some qualities that need known when I'm in the workplace, when that's expected of me in leadership. So I can act in that role when I need to, but that's not my preference. And so when I come home, that's me and who I am. And eventually at the workplace, I can let down that guard, let down that masquerade and be who I am. So that's really all that I have to say on that. And I can't remember anything else. I'm sorry. Does anybody else have anything to add?
I'm also an ambivert, and as a solo entrepreneur with my business, people always tell me, they're like, you're not an introvert. I have to explain that I'm a social introvert, and also that if I'm not my own hype man, nobody's going to be. So I have to get out there. I have to be visible and the face of introvert travels. But at the end of the day, I am very much an introvert. I gotta shut things off and kind of like go into my nest. But I think there are a lot of people out there who, by just circumstance, by the position at work or whatever the situation might be, we're sort of forced to play the role of an extrovert. But there's a lot of us out there, kind of hidden introverts, who really do have to go back to our nests at the end of the day. And that's the part that people don't see. They only see the visible extroverted parts of ourselves. And we have our own little worlds of our own behind the scenes.
And you're making me think of, like, I usually talk about famous introverts, but I didn't today, but like Barack Obama and Michael Jordan, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and the list goes on. All of these people turn it on when they're passionate about something and when they're at work. People are really surprised about Barack and Michael Jordan at all. That's their work persona. That's what they're passionate about. They can lead, and they use their introvertedness to help be great leaders and captains of winning basketball teams. And so, just giving you an example of how they turn it on when they have to, but then they need to go home and chill and decompress in the way that we need to as an introvert versus how extroverts do.
Yeah. And Cynthia put in the chat the question Ogana asked about what would you recommend for those who aspire to be managerial directors, leaders, as an extroverted introvert. I think that's part of it. Like when you need to be in certain spaces and you have to, kind of match what the culture is without, putting a burden on yourself, right? And making those connections, making those alliances, having your board of directors, so your mentors as well as your sponsors within the organization who are going to help shepherd you and put you on the track to be prepared for those managerial and director roles. And for me, I will say I didn't come up with a mentor, but I did engage in peer mentoring. So I had a group of kind of peer mentors that helped me, and not always in my industry, that helped me to navigate how to ascend, the skill set that I would need, things that I would need to do. I used to have to give presentations, at least 5 presentations every month to a board of directors. And prior to that, I was not a presentation person, but after that, now it's like, it's nothing. So, getting yourself into those 10,000 hours of practice that will help to well position you for ascension within organizations, I think is very helpful.
I was just going to mention, I also think that it's important that when you're thinking about like how you want to, when you're looking at career pathing and looking at how you might want to ascend within your own organization, also don't forget about your network outside of the organization. And the reason why I want to just mention that is because, sometimes depending on where we already are within our organization and depending upon the culture that exists, it may be more challenging based off of who we are to like be able to move into different positions, or you might have hit a ceiling and it may just be sort of stagnant at that point in your career. And when you're able to utilize your connections outside the organization, you have a couple of things working for you. So one is that, there's no misconceptions about who you are at this point, right? You can always reinvent yourself as well as an introvert. Like, I'm not saying to emulate extroverts. I'm not saying to become an extrovert. I 100% believe that you can be introverted and be an amazing leader, and many of us are. But you have, with outside of your organization, you can use that to work for you or in your best interest. And you can cultivate additional contacts and network with people now, especially virtually, which works to our advantage based off of our personality types and also just being able to manage our energy levels. And I think just to kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Christina said, about being able to turn it on or off when you're in some of these positions. I think it's important to remember is to manage your energy. And what I mean about that is like budget the energy that you have. Like I'm never going to be an extrovert. I can turn it on when I need to, but I'm never going to be inauthentic to who I am. And so the way that I do that is by managing and budgeting the energy that I have internally and being aware and understanding of how much energy, like how much cash do I have? Like how much energy am I going to expend on this event? And then prioritizing my life and my work on that. Like, is this meeting really going to take all the energy I have left remaining? Maybe I need to save it for this next thing because this is where I really want to make an impact. So I think that that's something to think about, like as you're trying to figure out like how to navigate the workplace and how to move up within your organization, but also don't forget about what you may have working for you outside of your organization and the contacts you may be able to make external to where you're currently at.
Well, thank you, everyone. We are at time. I want to thank my beautiful introverts for joining us. I want to thank my beautiful extroverts wanting to learn and know more about us. I want to thank my panelists for your brilliance, your creativity, your positive energy, your love. I just feel the love. And so thank you all. And we will be following up with information for you via email or in a newsletter. And don't forget, it's World Introvert Day. So celebrate by chilling out and doing nothing. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Happy
Thanks,
holidays,
Jeri.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jeri.
Thank you.
So I guess you can stop recording now, Darrious.